Today's daf is daf Tzadik, Amud Aleph. We are up to the two dots. The Mishnah laid down we have two Mishnahs. One laid down the rule that that which is frequent always takes priority over that which is not frequent, which is rarer. And we brought psukim, and we said, for example, we brought psukim for that. And then we also learned Milvad Oilas Aboika, that the carbon oil comes first, because that's every single morning. Then afterwards you do the other kabbanas. And then the next mission that followed taught us the idea, called a Kudish Mechaber, anything which is more sacred, which is more significant, takes precedence. And we went through the karbanas, like the chatzos comes first, and then the oil, as far as the blood is concerned. As far as the limbs are concerned, the oil is more significant because the entire animal gets burnt on the mizbech. And so on and so forth. We went through the whole Mishnah, and yesterday we went through every single case in the Mishnah, we tried to work out why this particular carbon is more significant than the next. And then towards the end of the Mishnah, we started talking about birds. And we said that a bird carbon takes priority over a carbon mincha flower offering. Why? Because this involves blood. Says the Gemara, about 12 lines on the top of the page, birds take precedence. Shouldn't the flower offering take precedence? You have kabbanas, a flower offering, communal kabbanas, like carbon omer, the second day of Pesach, but you don't have, by a bird, any communal kabbanas that involve a bird. Says the Gemara, nevertheless, you're right, that is a certain virtue, but this advantage supersedes that. Then the Mishnah continues, minchas chayte, the mincha of a sinner. If somebody sins, the number of sins that the carbon that you bring is called a carbon oil of the yerid. You're wealthy, you bring an animal. Not so wealthy, you bring birds. Even less wealthy than that, you bring a carbon mincha. But that's called a minchas chayte, the mincha of a sinner. So we said over here that the Mishnah said that a minchas chayte takes priority over a minchas nedava. Says the Gemara, and the reason is because it comes to atone for your sin. Says the Gemara, the should be first. The carbon itself is more significant. You had oil and frankincense. You don't do that by a carbon of a sinner. Nevertheless, the advantage that mincha chayta has, that it forgives you for the sins, is even more significant than mechaperes, because it atones you for your sins. It expiates your sins. Okay, so in other words, there's another kind of a mincha called a mincha seita. It's not really an atonement, but it's a sinner seita. We're trying to verify whether she committed a sin or not. So we have a question. You've now faced with two kabbanas. You have a mincha seita and a minchas nadav. The Mishnah talks about the minchas of a sinner. What about the mincha of a seita? And they both come at the same time. Which carbon should you do first? Ezem and kedemis. Do we say minchas a double kedemis? You came to the shemen or levina. The carbon itself was significant because of oil and the spice, which you don't do by minchas seita. Ideal minchas seita carbon she came bor levaram. That is coming to sort out the sin. It's involved with the sin, trying to verify whether she committed a sin or not. Says the Gemara. It says in our Mishnah clearly that a minchas seita takes priority over minchas dava. So it's seeing minchas chayte the carbon minchas, only minchas chayte takes priority. Ham minchas seita, but the minchas of a seita light. I mean, let's infer from that minchas seita does not take priority. Says the Gemara, meek tani. If you're saying it's only limited to a minchas chayte taking priority over minchas dava, the Mishnah should have said the reason is because it atones, and that's referring to minchas chayte. But instead, what the Mishnah says is because it's involved with sins. And that includes a minchas seita as well, because it also has to do with the sin. It's not going to forgive you for the sin. It's going to verify whether you sin, but it's dealing with the sin. So maybe minchas seita includes minchas seita as well, that they take priority over the dava. It doesn't say because it atones. It says only because it involves the sin. Also comes in the sin. So therefore, we have no proof one way or another. So Toshma, come in here. We can try to bring another proof. And as follows, it says Zoom. Like this. The Bryce is talking about it's contrasting two flower offerings, but it doesn't spell out what we're talking about. All it says is Zu Kedem Zu. This flower offering comes from this one. Zu Bam and Achitin. This comes from wheat. Zu Bam, this comes from barley. So a wheat offering comes before barley, which mincha comes from barley? That's the mincha of a saita. Which mincha comes from wheat? Everything else. So the question is it the brisa comparing a minchas chayta, or is the brisa that takes precedence over a saita, or the brisa is even talking about minchas nadava, a voluntary carbon mincha, and that also takes priority over saita. So the Gemara says, wheat and barley, my love, minchas nadava. You're referring to minchas nadava takes priority over saita. Because if it's minchas of a sinner, it would have said because this atones rather than wheat and barley. Just say because this is mechaper. So we're talking about the mincha of nadava, and this answers your question. So the Gemara, no, who said? Maybe minchas chayta the minchas saita. Maybe it's talking about the mincha of a chayta. That takes priority over saita. Says the Gemara, if it's a minchas chayta, typically, then you should have told me the mechaperes. You should have, instead of saying this is wheat, it's a barley, you say that this atones, but mechaperes, and a saita does not atone. So the Gemara answers back. So what do you prefer to learn? That's from minchas nadava. Well, minchas nadava. Now, what's the real reason why nadava should be first? You said before, because it has oil and spice. So why doesn't the Mishnah say it has oil and spice? Why say wheat versus barley? Elamai, what do you think is better? Minchas nadava. Why did the Mishnah just say this requires oil, this has oil, this it doesn't? Ella, obviously, chad mitrei taimanaka. There are a couple of reasons for each thing, and the Mishnah only mentions one. So it could be the Mishnah talking about minchas chayta, and it only mentions one of them, wheat and barley, but you could have also said because this forgives, and it could be talking minchas nadava. We have no idea, so it's not resolved. Then the Mishnah also continued that the Mishnah then said that the chatas ha'oif takes precedence over an oilus ha'oif. So the Mishnah says, how do you know that? By an animal, we already learned before we have two psukim that an animal, in certain respects, a chatas comes first. By blood of certain things, oil comes first when it comes to the fats that goes on the mizbeach. And we had two psukim, one pasuk that seems to highlight that the second one is an oil, which is chatas first. Another one seems the pasuk says chatas, the oil is mentioned first. So that's how we reconcile it. So what about a bird? How do you know that a bird chatas takes precedence over a bird oil? That's what we learned. The hikriv, it says in one pasuk, the hikriv asher es asher lechatas rishon. It says in the pasuk that you should bring the bird that's a chatas first, and you should do the malika, from the back of the bird. Now, why do you have to tell me this is the first chatas? Because just a couple of psukim later, Shein Tamla don't need to say, because a couple of psukim later it says, and the second one bring as an oil. Well, if the second one's an oil, then obviously the first one's a chatas. Shein Tamla it says already. You don't have to tell me that this is the first, because it already said that the second is an oila. Obviously, chatas is the first. Why does the Torah have to highlight the first of chatas? This is supposed to draw a simile at any korban chatas. Always, that a korban chatas always takes priority over an oil that comes with it. So now he explains. There's three possible scenarios. And that is scenario number one. Chatas ha'oif and oila ha'oif. You have two birds. One is a chatas and one is an oila. Oila goes on his bed completely. The chatas ha'oif comes first. Bein chatas behema la'oila behema. Then you have another situation by animals. Chatas of an animal versus an oila. Chatas comes first. And the third one, which is the chiddush, is va'afilu chatas ha'oif la'oila behema. That the chatas bird takes precedence over a behema, an animal oila. That's how significant a chatas is. And now we're going to explain how we learn each one. Chatas ha'oif la'oila behema. Sorry, chatas ha'oif la'oila ha'oif. How do you know? Because it says in Pasuk it's a sheni, and the second one is an oila. So obviously, chatas is first. Chatas behema la'oila behema. By animals, the chatas comes first. Midrabbi Rachmana, because the Torah already we learned before. We just spoke about the two psukim that contradict each other. Yes, says Gemara. Those psukim. What about the chiddush of chatas ha'oif la'oila behema? How do you know that? That's from the extra words that this is the first animal you bring. The first one you bring is a chatas. The hikriv is a chatas l'shonda u'malach. Talking about a bird. This extra, the first one. So obviously the first one. Because the next one, it says in the next pasuk, the second one is an oila. So it comes to teach you that it takes precedence over animal. Now we're going to ask a few questions on this very notion. Coming here. Coming here. Rabbi Lezer says, we have these kabbanas. We said before that if you're rich, you bring an animal. If you cannot afford an animal, you bring a bird. If you cannot afford a bird, you bring a flower offering. Now, if you bring a bird in the place of an animal, you have to bring Korban Chatas, right? You walk in the base of Mikdash, you were tummy, you forgot, and then you renew, you forgot, and you renew again. You got to bring Korban Chatas. That Korban Chatas is Oil the commensurate to what you can afford. So we say that this one animal devolves into two birds. You got to bring a Chatas bird, and you got to bring an Oil bird. So what Rabbi Lezer says, Kol Makom, wherever Shenis Chalfa HaChatas, whenever the Chatas is changed and evolved into birds, then Chatas Kedemis. You have two birds now. One bird is a Chatas bird, one's an Oila bird. Then the Chatas birds always come first. But when it comes to a Yeledis, a woman who gives birth, here's interesting. A woman who gives birth has to bring, I don't care how rich or poor they are, they have to bring a bird, which is a Chatas bird. And they have to bring an animal. But if they cannot afford an animal, they bring a bird, but you only bring, in this case, one bird. And that bird is an Oila bird. And it's replacing the Oila animal. So he said, when it comes to a bird, the Oila Kedemis. The Oila comes before the Chatas. It's an exception. Yeah, and because this bird is replacing the Oila animal. Okay, and also because it says over here that the first bird you should take is so that it replaces the oil animal. Then the Gemara continues. Kol makom, and another reason is kol makom, anywhere shabor al chet, anywhere that you're replacing an animal which comes to sin, anywhere where the birds are there to chatas kedemis, it always comes first. But when it comes to Yeledis, even the kan oila kedemis, when it comes to Yeledis, there's no real sin. What sin did she do? She gave birth. So therefore, there's no real sin. The chatas does not take precedent at all. But and another thing is anytime you have two birds taking the place of a chatas kedemis, the bird of a chatas takes place first. Or the kan oila kedemis, but over here, you're taking the place of an oila animal, therefore the oila is first. As if to say, because since the oila animal would have been first, and now you have the bird takes precedence. But why would the oila animal be first? You just said before that a chatas bird versus an oila animal, the chatas bird takes precedence. So even though this oila bird is replacing an animal oila, so what? But the animal oila is second. First should be the chatas bird. So that seems that this Bryce argues what you said before. You said before, or it's a question on you. You said before that the oila chatas bird takes precedence over an animal. It seems here it doesn't. It seems that the animal oila takes precedence first. And in fact, even the bird oila that evolved from that takes precedence. So the Gemara, it's not a question. He says, the Rabbi says that when we say here that the oila bird is first, he just meant that the Torah will write the oila bird before the chatas mikra. Written in the Torah, the oila bird first, but in actuality, when it came to do the service, the chatas bird comes first. Tosha doesn't like that. What it means is the Torah wrote something which is incorrect. So Tosha says it means when it comes to consecrating the animals, first consecrate the oila and then consecrate the chatas. But when it comes to actually the service, our Mishnah, the din is right that the oila animal takes place after the chatas bird. So we're going to ask more questions. Tosh, we're coming here. It says in our understanding is we're talking about sukkah. Sukkah, you have a whole series of animals you got to bring. You got to bring purim, you got to bring bulls. Koidmil elim, they come before the rams. And the elim, the rams, koidmil lechvasim, come before the sheep. And the kvasim, the sheep come before the goat. Now, the goat on Yom Tov, we learned in Gemara Shavuos, is actually a karban chatas. So somebody who didn't know that they were tamei, they entered the Beis Hamikdash, and then they found that afterwards. So they cannot bring a karban chatas, so the seir regolim atones for that. So here's a chatas, and it's last. You said that the chatas comes first. Here, it's last. My love, the chatas, talking about sukkahs, where we know it's a chatas, and yet in the order of in the brisa, it comes last. I said, well, I know who said we're talking about sukkahs. We're talking about the dove. We're talking about individual people who brought a donation. If he has two animals he's bringing, or two people at the same time, and one is a ram, let's say, one is a sheep. This is the order of events. And what's the logic behind it? Pardon, why do bulls come before rams? If, let's say, you have two animals, you want to bring a bull and a ram, we'll take the bull first. Or if two people are there coming at the same time, we will take the bull first. It has three Yisraelim. It has much more libations that come with the large animal. Why ran before a sheep? Because they have two Yisraelis. So there again, it's more than a lamb, which only has one. So why does Kvasi come before seeding? Why does sheep come before the goats? There's more of the animal that go in the Mizbech. A sheep, the hindquarters go in the Mizbech, or a goat doesn't. Now, even though we're talking about an oiler where the entire animal sits on the Mizbech, but it means in general, other kabbanas are made out of sheep, more of it goes onto the Mizbech, and therefore it takes priority. So no proof one way or another. Okay, Tashma coming out. If you have a Par Koyin Mashiach, a Koyin Gadol that we had in Merharius, that by mistake thought that he permitted to do something and went ahead and did it, and turned out to be that he was wrong. He has to bring a bull for a Chatas, and then you have at the same time, when the entire community relied on the bezin, they made a psak, which was totally wrong. It's a fallacy. And again, you have to bring a carbon. So which carbon takes priority? Par Koyin Mashiach comes before Par Helam Davash Tzibur. Okay, the Torah, we live for the Torah. Then what about Pad Helam Davash Tzibur? They made it some kind of Veda. They did some kind of Veda that relied on the bezin by mistake. And then you have another carbon. Suddenly, the bezin also made a ruling when it comes to Avodah Zarah, and they were wrong. And everybody followed the bezin. So there they have to bring two kabbanas. They bring a bull and they bring also a goat. And there the bull is an oiler and the goat is a chatas. So it says over here, the pad helen davash tzibur, which is the chatas, koidim comes before the pad avodah before the bull of the avodah which is an oiler. Then he says the pad avodah the bull of avodah zarah, which is an oiler, comes koidim before se'id avodah before the goats of avodah zarah, which is a chatas. Here clearly you have a case where the what do you call it? The oiler comes before the chatas, which is the opposite of what he said till now. So he says here, now we see the chatas, and the paragoy is an oiler. Why is that first? Says the Gemara. Okay, you're asking me a question from the end of the brayso, but look at the beginning. The aim of nation. Look at the beginning. What does it say in the beginning? It says in the beginning, par helim davash tzibur. What was the first case? Second case, you have this bull from the community, which is a chatas. Koidim lepar avodah comes before the bull of avodah zarah, which is an oiler. So clearly, chatas precedes an oiler. So the Gemara says that is not a concern. We're not interested if it's all animals. Then we all agree chatas takes precedence. You came along and said two different kinds of species. You have a bird and you have a cow, and you said that the bird takes precedence over the cow. Here we have two species. We have a cow, a bull, and we have a goat. And the goat is a chatas, the bull is an oiler, and the bull takes precedence because the bull is the most significant animal. So going back to the case of the bird chatas and the oiler animal, the animal is much more chashuv. The oiler should be first, not like you say. Bechad mina lo kamrinin. Bechad mina lo kamrinin. Bechad mina lo kamrinin. The chatas kodma. Of course, there's no argument. Ki kamrina. We're talking about today mini, where you have two different species. And Ashkon oiler the kodma chatos, and we find here that an oiler comes before chatos. So the bird should follow the animal, not the other way around. So we only have two answers. Amri Marinizul, they said, this is a unique case. The kodma chatos b'avodah zarah is a unique case. Why is that a unique case? Because chosar aleph, the way the word chatos is written in the Torah, it's minus an aleph. Lechatos ksiv. It says over here that you have to bring a goat. Lechatos, which as if to say it's missing, this is different. All of the chatos, this will come last rather than first. Ravina says, it says in that very pasuk that when you bring this, you forgot, you bring a carbon, avodah zarah, there it says, kim mishpat, follow these rules, follow the way I wrote it here. And the way it's written in the pasuk, the chatos comes last. So it's a decree from the Torah, and therefore you can't ask me a question, but everywhere else, the bird chatas will take priority over the animal oiler. Says he now introduce the fact that the mishpat means this is how you should follow. It's a custom. It doesn't matter, and even though it's different than the general rule. Is I feel let's go back to the top of the page. We thought it was sukkahs, and then because of your question, how come the goat is last? We change it to a private kabbanis. No, we'll leave it part in the chag. It's sukkahs. Kimishpatam ksibu by sukkahs. It says you should bring all of these animals, and it concludes bring the total number kimishpatam. Follow this order. So therefore, the Torah is making it a unique case. Next case. Iboilu, we have a case question. Iboilu, we have a question when you have Chatas or Iboilu's Behema, a very interesting conundrum. You have three different kabbalas. You have a Chatas Oif, a bird Chatas. You have an Oila's Behema, a Behema animal Oila. We said before the bird Chatas, according to the rights at least, takes precedence over the Behema. And then you have Maisa Behema. And we learned before in the Mishnah that Maisa Behema takes precedence over a bird because it's Zevach, it's a carbon, it's Shchita, and most kabbalas are with Shchita. And Oila, even though Oila also is a bird, is a thing, but we have a special pasuk that says that the Oila, that the Oila comes after the Chatas. So now, we have a special pasuk. We said the binyan av that the Chatas bird takes precedence over the Oila animal. So now you're confronted with these three different kabbalas. Which one should come first? Who comes first? Tigdam Chatas, the Chatas or Abe come first. Ika Maisa Behema. Maisa Behema, this says it comes before the bird. Okay. So it's Lakada Maisa, so let's do Maisa Behema first. It's a problem. Because Oila comes before Maisa Behema. Ika Oila's Behema, the Kadmale. Oila comes before Maisa Behema because the Oila, the entire animal, goes on his Beach, it's Kachim, and Maisa Behema is not. Tigdaim Oila Behema. So okay, so bring Oila Behema first. You can't, because you just said that a Chatas bird comes first. Ika Chatas Oiv, the Kadmale. What should we do? So we have two opinions. Here in Babel Targima, we translated Min Zevach Odif. We will put the Maisa Behema first because the fact that it's a Behema and Yishchita, that takes precedence. The Oila also the Behema, but there we have a special pasuk to tell you that the Behema Oila follows the Chatas bird. But Marabam in Israel they say Eile Bas Oila. In Israel they say the following. They say totally different. Eile ba'oilas behema b'chatas oiv, that the oila behema should take precedence over anything else, v'agba and ma'aser, and lift it above ma'aser as well. And what? So this is what you do. First, the oila behemoth screams out that the chatas bird should be first. So the chatas bird is first. And then the Oiled Behema says, what's your advantage, Maisa Behema? Is your advantage that, what do you call that? You're Zevach. I'm also Zevach. So therefore, why should you go first? And therefore, that's the order. The bird, the Behema, Oiled Behema, and then followed by Maisa Behema. Next Mishnah, Kol HaChatoy Shebetoida, all the Karmachat in the Toida, Koidim Lashom has come before the Asham. Chatas takes precedence over Asham. Chutz Masham Mitzvah, except only Asham, a Mitzvah brings a number of kabbalas, and his Asham is where they take the blood from the Asham and they sprinkle it on his right earlobe, his right thumb, his right toe. Then they do the same with the oil. Is it to enable this Mitzvah to rejoin and to be able to eat kabbalas? And the fact that it enables you to eat kabbalas is a step up from just forgiving you for your sins. Because this comes to prepare you, to enable you to be able to eat from the kabbalas, and therefore that comes first. All the Hashem have to be 2 years old. You got to pay $2, even if you're any kind of Hashem, including an Hashem Toli, an Hashem where you're not sure if you committed a sin, you ate fat, you don't know if it's kosher or not kosher, including in that, an Hashem Toli has to be 2 shkolim. Rabbeinu Yain explains in Gemara Brachos the reason why Asham Toli is so expensive, because the regular chatas there's no value. We said before it's a danka, nothing, because when you don't know if you sinned, it's very easy to delude yourself with saying I didn't do anything wrong. So by us, we need to wake you up and you should do tshuva. So therefore, we charge you more for it. Chutz ma'asham nozer v'asham etzer. Exceptions are the Asham of a Nazir and the Asham of Mitzvah, which again are not really for sins. Shehain boyin b'nei shasam, they're a year old, but ain't boyin b'ketzes kol, there's no minimum. Then he says, Kishem shekoymin b'hakravasim, and just like we said, all of these animals, everything we learned till now, that these are brought up first on the base of English, koymin b'chalasim. So too, they take precedence when it comes to eating. They always come first. Eat those first. Shlomim shel emesh. There's 2 ways of learning pshat in the Gemara, but you have a carbon shlomim from yesterday, and you have a shlomim shel yom, and you have a carbon shlomim of today. Shel emesh can we do first yesterday's, because you shouldn't pass by mitzvahs, and also it's a zilzul. You're insulting the mitzvah by it's hanging around for a whole day already, and you make it hang around longer. So do that first. Do the one from yesterday. What about Shalomim Shel Emesh versus Chatzas V'Ashim Shel Yom? We have a Korban Shalom from yesterday and a Chatzas of today. We learned before Chatzas and Ashim, Kotchim, they take precedence of Shalomim, but this is yesterday's Shalomim. Now there's two ways of learning Pshat. One way of learning Pshat is yesterday's Shalomim and today's Chatzas, and now you have to go ahead and shecht and do everything else. Which one should you do first? Or you actually already shechted yesterday's Shalomim, and now you're shechting today's Chatzas. The question is, which one should you eat first? Tosfos finds that a bit problematic because the Chatzas is going to, whichever one that can expire first. The Shlomim is going to expire today in the afternoon. The Chatzas you can eat day and night. So, of course, you should eat the Shlomim first. So, anyway, what do you call it? So you have these two. Shlomim, Shalom, the Meir says, even so, yesterday Shlomim takes precedence because it was there first. And Chachamim say Chatzas Koydem is no, and even in this case, Chatzas is first, but nature he kotchim. It's kotchim. They said the cool so they can change the way they eat. They can eat one day one way, another day. And they can grill it. Shlukin they can stew it. They can cook it. And furthermore, losses the toichet tav chulin. You're allowed to bring spices of chulin because we learned that chulin is only forbidden to put in mizbech, but here you're just mixing it with the food. And the bigger chiddush is, and here's the argument with tavle truma. You can also put spices of truma, even no problem. Even though what you're doing is putting a limit now on the time. How much normally truma there's no time limit. But if you mix it with a carbon, then whatever time limit the carbon has is shared by the spices, and no problem. Do that anyway. And Ameir says, "Lo yitin l'teichet tavadu." Don't do that. Shaloi yavi hatruma l'dei psul. Why put yourself in an individual situation that you might end up turning truma into nicer? Setting mari boilu. We learned these two. It's axiomatic that Todah is first and that Mekudesh is first. What happens is two are opposing each other. Which takes precedence, the Todah or the Mekudesh? Ibailu, Todah Mekudesh, Ezemem Kodim, which takes precedence? Todah Kodim, does Todah take precedence? Mishum the Todah, or Dim Mekudesh Kodim, or maybe Mekudesh, the Kodesh. No, they both are significant. Which one takes priority? Tashma coming here. And now we're going to go through the whole Mishnah. We go through every carbon, and we're going to say each carbon l'chayda is a Todah versus a Mekudesh. And yet the Mishnah clearly says you go after the Todah. So, for example, Tamidin, the carbon tamid of every single day, is what do you call it? Tamidin, the carbon tamid every single day is I just lost the place. Is kaidul musafin, come before the musafin. Now, the tamid is a daily thing. The musafin is kaddish. You only do it on Shabbos, and it says clearly that the tamid comes first. Does not show that tadish, todah kaidim. Yeah, says the Gemara. So that's one proof. Now, just very quickly, right now we're assuming that the carbon tamid of Shabbos is no different than the carbon tamid of Monday or Tuesday, and therefore, so that's tadir versus karmusa, which is Shabbosdik. But the Gemara's answer is going to be the same principle throughout the entire. Now, the next section of the Gemara is that when the musaf of Shabbos is special because of the Shabbosdik musaf, so too is the carbon tamid of Shabbos. The carbon tamid of Shabbos is not the same as the tamid of a Thursday. It's a Shabbosdik tamid. Just like we had a discussion a while ago, if the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur only did the activities that meant for Yom Kippur, or he did all the activities. Like we said, the Kohen Gadol was weak, and therefore we wanted to do as early as possible, cleaning up the ashes, to clean up the ashes. And the Tosfos says, what are you talking about? Kohen Gadol do the ashes. Kohen Gadol only does the significant avodas. But Rashi says the Kohen Gadol did everything on Yom Kippur because everything on Yom Kippur became a Yom Kippur avodah, even the things that you ordinarily did. And that's going to be the to and fro here in the entire Gemara. So right now we think that the Tamid is a Tadir and the Musaf is Mekudesh. And yet we say with Tamid is first. So you want to know. One of the questions, Avagav the Musafi Kaddishi, even though Musaf is holier. Someone answers back. Otu Shabbos le Musafin Hanoi, the Tamidin le Hanoi. You think that what? You think that Shabbos has only affected the Musaf, didn't affect the Tamid? The Tamid is also holy. And now we'll continue going. And Tosfos says, I don't understand. Once we've established this principle, why are we continuing the same to and fro? And remains with a question. Tashma coming here. Must be that each one is adding something, but you got to work out what it's adding. Tashma coming here. And Musaf Shabbos, Kait Musaf Chedesh. The Chedesh is holy in the Shabbos because it's called a Moyed, it's a Yom Tov, but Shabbos is more frequent. And yet we see that you do Musaf before the Chedesh. In fact, this coming Shabbos is going to be, we're going to have Shabbos Chanukah, we're going to have three things, and all these questions, which Haftarah comes first, and because you have Shabbos, you have Rosh Chodesh, and you have Chanukah. So the same thing. Auto Shchayim Musaf in the day, Hani Musaf Shabbat Hani, when Shchayim had an effect on the Musaf what do you call it, the Musaf of Shabbos? Of course it did. Toshma next thing. Musaf Shchayim Shchayim Musaf Rosh Hashanah. Shchayim Musaf comes before Rosh Hashanah. Tadir versus Mekudesh. I've got Rosh Hashanah Kacha is holier. So the Gemara Auto Rosh Hashanah Musaf today, Hani Musaf Shchayim Hani. I don't think Rosh Hashanah had an effect also on the Musaf of Shabbos. It became a special Musaf. So Rosh Hashanah Musaf. Toshma coming here. We have an argument Besil Mishaming Gemara brachas. What should you do first? Kiddush Friday night. Should you first make Bar Priya Gafen and then Kiddush, or Kiddush and Bar Priya Gafen? Besil says two things. Firstly, you make Bar Priya Gafen because the only reason why you're making Kiddush now is because you have wine. So the Bar Priya Gafen is the catalyst for the Kiddush, so that comes first. And another reason is because Bar Priya Gafen is Tadir. And Tadir and Kiddush is only Friday night. Tadir, Sheina Tadir, Tadir Kodim. Bar Priya Gafen you make every time you drink wine. So you want to touch by coming here. The brach of wine is steady. Ubich is constant. Ubich is hayom eina tedira is not frequent. Now l'chayda avagad the bich of the yom kedusha, but Shabbos is the kiddush of Shabbos. That's holy. Tadir mekudesh. So it's the same thing. Otu Shabbos the birchas hayom ahanoi the birchas hayom lahanoi. You don't think the Bar Priya Gafen also became special? You think the Bar Priya Gafen of Shabbos is the same Bar Priya Gafen as a Tuesday? In fact, the Bar Priya Gafen becomes part of the mitzvah. So normally, you can't make a bracha for somebody else. But birchas hamitzvahs. Even though I was ready to eat a kiddush, I can make kiddush for you again. We hang Rosh Hashanah because I am responsible for you, and not only am I mitzi you the kiddush, I can be mitzi Bar Priya Gafen as well. Because now the Bar Priya Gafen becomes part of the Birchas HaMitzvahs. So therefore, they're both Mekudesh. Says you want to touch my coming here. What happens? We know there's a cutoff time. Mincha starts at midday, and Musaf starts earlier than that, and it goes the entire day. What happens? You didn't daven Musaf till midday. What are you supposed to do now? Mincha or Musaf? In fact, we'll notice that Yom Kippur we should try to make sure that we start Musaf before midday, because then goes all these shilas. Some poskim say, because the din is that you're supposed to do mincha first before musaf once it comes time mincha. Some poskim say talk about when there's no time left in the day, you have to choose one or the other. But there's plenty of time, then you just do musaf first and then mincha, which is what most people do anyway. And then other poskim say no, that when it comes to time of mincha, you got to stop and do mincha unless it's like tzibur, then maybe it's different. So the Gemara says, "Mispal adam shemincha va'achikach shomusaf." Daven mincha first and then musaf. Why could mincha study? Same thing. So more answer the same thing. Otu Shabbos the tefillas musafin hanoi is mincha hanoi. The mincha of Shabbos is just as holy as the musaf. So therefore, so it's holy and it's tadas. Therefore, it takes precedence. Toshma coming here. We just learned the Mishnah. Shlomim shalamis chatas v'ashav sheyim shel yoyim. It says in the Mishnah you had yesterday shlomim, today's chatas. The shlomim shalamis kaibin. Yesterday shlomim takes place first. Now why? It seems from here. Let's infer. What happens both from the same day? Shlomim from today and the chatas today. You do chatas first. Chatas v'ashav kaibin. Now which is more common, the shlomim or the chatas? The shlomim is. People giving Thanksgiving offering and they make a net, they bring a carbon. Shlomim is much more often, much more common than a chatas. And you have to do chatas first because it's holier. You see, because it forgives. I've come to Shlomo Tidiri. Omar Rava. So Rava comes along and says you're mixing things up. There's tadir and there's matzah. Matzah means that it's more common, but it's not frequent. It's not tadir. It's not something you have to do all the time. And therefore, it's not what the issue we're talking about over here. Shlomim versus Shlomim is just matzah. It's not tadir. You don't have to do it. The matzah is very different. Matzah does not have the strength to override Mekudesh. We're talking about tadir, where it's common and you have to do it all the time. So the Gemara, matzah kamre tadir kumabayilan. Our question was about tadir. Matzah like kumabayilan. We never had a question about matzah. Amalei when the Gemara finishes the sugi. Amalei about Yehuda l'Rava. Otu matzah lav tadir. You're going to tell me that matzah is not considered common? But Tanya, we learned in a brisa the following. We know that the first mission increases that 36 Avedas that you receive kares. If you did it by mistake, you bring a korban chatas. There are two positive mitzvahs that you get kares. If you didn't bring a korban pesach, if you didn't circumcise yourself. But over there, those two exceptions that you don't bring a korban chatas, if you did it by mistake, because the pasuk says, Asher lo yiseh aseret, if you didn't do it. So then it says, how do you know to exclude both? Maybe only exclude one of those mitzvahs, not the other one. But time you learn oitzi as a pesach. Let's exclude the korban pesach. She'enoi tadir. It's only once a year. And I won't exclude the milah shehi tadira, which is common. So there's what do you see here? And see clearly from here that we're talking about what it means tadira, milah. It's only much. It's more available. It's more prevalent. And yet we're saying here we're using the rule of tadir shayla tadir kaidim. You said before that matzah and tadir are two different things. Says the Gemara, my tadira. You know what tadira is? Tadira with mitzvahs. It has a lot of mitzvahs involved. Bris Milah has 13 different covenants, and therefore that's what we mean here by tadir. Not that's really tadir, but Milah is a much more chashuv mitzvah than Korban Pesach. So maybe Milah, you should bring a Korban Chatas if you did by mistake. Or you by saying Milah, the Gabi Pesach kitadid amir. Milah compared to Pesach like tadir. It's so much more often. The Pesach is once a year, and it's so much more often than that, so it's considered tadir. But the relationship or the ratio between Shalomim and Chatas is not that great.